COVID booster, baby. Let's go. Let us know when we're officially live, DP, and we'll stop talking shit.
Just got to go on Instagram.
Nice.
I'm on my 8th COVID booster.
8. That's awesome.
I'm just kidding.
How many are there?
I don't know.
You got to collect them all.
I'm at 0.
You got to
are
hit a
live.
dozen. Yeah, same actually. Same. Which is good.
That's why you're
Look,
still here.
exactly. Look who wins in the end, Matt.
That's right.
They said we were crazy, and now look at us.
Right.
But that's a good place to be, ladies and gentlemen. We are officially live with Matt Leyshock. Dude, I've been so excited for this episode for so long, like wanting to get you in here. For people who don't know, Matt is an absolute legend in the space. And I would imagine that if you're watching this podcast, you're already aware of who this guy is. Because if you're in this space at all, you hear about Matt Leyshock. And he's never one to take the spotlight for himself, but my man deserves some spotlight. So what's up, Matt? Thanks for being here, dude.
Well, thank you. I think legend might be a bit heavy-handed, but I'll take it. I'll take it.
I don't know, man. When you consider the fighters you've touched, what you did with Pinnacle, your background even before that, you obviously fought yourself. Like, I don't know, man. You've been pretty invested in the game with some of the best to ever do it from this region.
Yeah, well, that's true. That I'll take credit for that.
I'll take that compliment. Thanks.
Well, we've had a lot of really good, talented guys here, like over the years that, I'm trying to think about how far back do I want to go on this. So if you look back in like the mid 90s, there was probably 5 gyms in the country. And one of the better ones was here. Most people don't know that. It was on Golden Mile Highway. The one trainer is still a trainer now, Donnie Caker. He runs PTT. So before him, his trainer was Eric Hibbler. Eric Hibbler was sort of the guy who kind of seeded all of the ground, if you want to say it that way. Whatever. He was the one that sort of planted the original set, right? So Eric Hibbler had, I have no idea how many actually he had. He was in a garage in Green Tree, probably 94. He fought Jens Pulver. Jens Pulver broke his jaw with a knee. He also fought, who else did he fight? I don't remember all of the stuff. I could probably pull it, or you could pull it up.
Let's pull it up.
So he was like the first guy, legit guy, who was fighting out of this area. And he had a bunch of guys that during my time were like, pretty relevant in like the national scene. And, so we've been doing this for a long time. This isn't like new.
Yeah.
It's been, I've been in it since I was like a kid, and I've watched, we had a kid. So you've heard of Mac Danzig. He's from, that was the first guy I ever started training with. Just like totally randomly.
I had no idea he was local.
Yeah. He's local. He hates it here.
I mean,
so he would never tell anybody he was from here. When he changed his name, he had a weird, like, I feel weird even like saying it. So he had some like weird, like abuse stuff happen in his family when he was like a kid. I never asked him. He definitely was closed off about it.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay, not bringing that up.
Yeah.
And so he changed he used to go fight in Ohio in like no rules stuff, like literal no rules. Under the name John Tektarov, like Oleg,
Nice.
And then he was legit. So like there was all these like super talented guys that came from here that most people don't know. And then they, so Eric Hibbler had some guys. He's a oddball. I like him. Every time I've met him, he's been fine. But like apparently, if you're spend a lot of time around him, I guess he's like crazy, which is not a surprise because I'm crazy too.
We're all business,
crazy. Right? Yeah. We're crazy people, so you're doing a crazy thing. Eventually, relationships divide. Those guys went on to being their own trainers. That's like where Commonworthy was the last relevant guy that Eric Hibbler actually had himself. But anyway, he's the original.
Nice.
And then Donnie Caker and Chris Custer were my trainers. Chris Custer at one point was the best guy in the country in basically every facet of fighting. He won the Arnold Classic. He won the Absolute in that. He's kind of like the Isaac Greeley of the early 2000s. You know, he's a super nice dude. He's from Finleyville, very tough, very skilled. Could do it all, could kickbox. He has, you know, he fought like Tony Fricklin.
Yeah.
He fought Joe Dorkson, who was ranked number 2 in the country at the time. A bunch of other guys. So
it was wild. It's wild how small the scene seems even still.
Sure.
But thinking back to that era, that's when, like, you're already saying names that people know. Jens Pulver, Joe Dirksen. Like, you're going to know these guys just because, like, that's who was fighting back then. Like, the pool was so small.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
If you were going to a local, like a regional show, like, well, it depends on which one you go. There wasn't a ton, but like the UFC was basically a regional show that just kind of made it.
Yes.
You know, they had a pay-per-view deal. That's what got them over, essentially. I mean, I remember when it was blacked out for real.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when that was all a thing. But yeah, so we've always had like good guys. That's why I don't take the legend thing. You know what I mean?
I'm still gonna say it just so you know. But even the UFC, it's kind of funny if you look at it. Like, UFC probably wasn't going to make it without the Fertittas having massive cash in their back pocket and taking a risk either. Like, even that
was the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah,
that's what
exactly.
That's what put everybody over.
And they funded that themselves, from what I understand.
Yeah, they
which
did.
is crazy.
Well, they doubled down because they were
exactly.
losing. And it was weird because I remember watching this thing. I've heard other people say this, so it might not sound like an original thought, but at the time it was. And I'm watching this. I'm like, why doesn't everybody like love this? I don't get it. You know, and then like you go to one and you're like, this is like the coolest thing I've ever seen. I mean, for like our, you know, weirdo types, like this is like the thing. So why doesn't everybody like this? You know, and it's like, did you ever have a band you really like? And you're like, why are these like not the biggest band in the world?
Absolutely.
You know, like mine was like always strung out. I always thought they were like great.
Nice.
Whatever. But anyway, fighting was the same way. I'm like, why isn't this like everywhere? And then the Ultimate Fighter came out. And I think the thing that did, at least it's the way it felt in like 2005, was it made them like, it humanized it. Because they were like, oh, these are just like normal, you know, dudes. College guys.
Exactly.
And,
dude,
like,
they pushed so hard. The guys had college degrees and all this stuff. Like, you could tell they were really hammering that.
That was like the big sales point, is like, because at that time, the human cockfighting thing, all that was like really relevant. So they were really pushing that. And you know, it was like weird to do it, which it is weird to do. I don't disagree. You know, I get it from a normal person's perspective, like as much as I can.
Sure.
You know, I understand that, but that's what the Ultimate Fighter did, is it made, it's really what it did. They now have sort of like skewed it that it was Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner, and that helped, trust me. That got the normies that wouldn't have normally watched it like super into it. I get that. But what it really did was it normalized the type of people that do it, because we all seemed super nuts. Like it was Tank Abbott. That was like the guy, right? And then you know, he's actually a really smart guy. If you ever like listen to his podcasts or stuff, he's like a really like legitimately smart guy. But when you watch him like smash some dude's face in and then like laugh and dance about it, you're like, oh, that's
is like, a psycho.
This is like crazy people stuff. You know, so like your average person's probably, it's like a snuff thing. It's like bare knuckle is right now.
Makes perfect sense. And dude, I totally get that. I see that. I see it even regionally too. Like, I definitely think things are growing again in Pittsburgh. Like, I'm super proud, super honored to be a part of this, like, kind of reemergence of the scene. But like, in that downtime, and you obviously, Pinnacle was a massive part of that wave as well in the early 2010s up through 18-ish. You guys were just crushing it in the city. But even back then, I had that same feeling that you were saying, like, why doesn't everybody love this? Like, dude, we love the Steelers, we love the Penguins, we love our sports in Pittsburgh. Why is fighting not on that same level? Like, it is so much more interesting to me. And I love those other sports. I'm wearing a freaking Steelers hat. Like, I love those sports. But why does the average person not tap into regional MMA? It's crazy to me.
Well, I've thought about that question a lot over the years. It was like, be a promoter and a gym owner. And the conclusion that I have come to is probably not the one everybody wants to hear, but I feel like so okay, let me take a step back. This is gonna sound like kind of a weird tangent, but it'll all make sense. So I had a friend that's parents had a Chinese restaurant when we were like kids, and I used to ask him stuff, and he would say, "We only need to make General Tso's because everybody just orders General Tso's.
Sure.
There's no reason for us to have anything else. We probably sell 98% General Tso's and then like 2% everything else."
Sure.
And I feel like that's Pittsburgh. They're like, we're 98% Steelers, or say 90% Steelers, 8% Penguins, 2% Pirates, and then like we don't have bandwidth for anything else, even though that's only like 3 months out of the year, right?
Yeah,
and that's like pretty much what they care about.
You might be onto something because like even the Hounds are not mainstream by any means.
Well, none of them are. Really.
And that's yeah.
I mean, even like the Penguins, people are fans. Like they'll watch the games when they make it to some level in the playoffs, but nobody's like paying attention to it.
Yeah,
not many.
Dude, you're definitely onto something there. But I still think like there's obviously room to grow with MMA, with the fighting scene. Like we can feel it kind of event over event. Like something's definitely starting to happen. And just the fighters that are available.
Well, I'll tell you what the trick is. There's a trick to it. It's the same thing. It's the tale as old as time. The UFC did it. Everybody does it. You have to find a guy that everybody connects to. That's how it starts, right? So like my guy was Mike Marcherico, right? Everybody connected to him for whatever reason. He had his own group first, and Cody Garbrandt, Dom Mazzata, all these guys, right? They had their own little tribe, and they built them up. And then they take this tribe and you put this tribe against each other, and next thing you know, and all these people are talking about it. That's what it is. It's not a thing. It's not like exposure because everybody knows what fighting is now. It's not like if you put a commercial together and you run it on the airwaves for, 6 weeks leading up to the fight. You're going to have an ROI that's like, you're not going to be like, oh, we generally sell 800 tickets and now we sold 10,000, right? You're probably only going to have like maybe a handful of people come from that show. That's not what connects them. What connects them is my best friend is fighting some dude in a cage tomorrow. For sure. And we are like kind of shocked and we're like worried for him. That's what sells it.
Yeah.
Right? It's that like that personal connection. That's what makes it interesting. And if you don't have somebody who really understands that, and you don't have a kid, like the worst thing you could do is put a guy in a situation where it looks like you're setting him up to win, but he also has to win, right? Can't have him go out there and just get cleaned out because then they lose all the steam, right? So it's like a balance. That's the hard part.
It's super hard, man. It's fun to balance. Like I'm enjoying that side of the business for sure. And I think in general, Pittsburgh like does take pretty hard fights. But what I want to give you shine for now, if I'm not allowed to call you a legend, I have to at least give you credit for this. You've said yes to every opponent we've ever thrown at one of your guys. Like there's no saying no.
I'll just say that's also in boxing too. Until we get to a certain point, right? Until as amateurs, you should be fighting everybody. If you are not taking tough fights as an amateur, you're missing the point. This is probably not for you. But it's probably just not for you. And if your coach is worried about your record, he's probably not the coach for you. Okay, like here's the reality of wins and losses. If you're getting cleaned out as an amateur, this is probably not what you're going to do anyway, right? Like if you can't get an amateur win, you're not going to go 1-11 and then be like, "Whoa, he's the next like
suddenly an awesome pro." Yeah,
right? It's just not how it works. And the problem is, it's the same problem we have in boxing, by the way. So this is not just like I'm probably the only guy that has like equal experience in both sets, right?
Yep.
And so there's some carryover. Boxing's more of a business. It's been around longer. That's like one of the things because I was a boxing promoter too. So I worked with like Lou DiBella, Don King, a bunch of regional guys, whatever. But you learn that because boxing has been around longer, it's more of like a structured business that has sort of like a procedural thing where in MMA, it's just like kind of like, what's the promoter do? Right. And in boxing, they've learned the art of matchmaking way more than, local mixed martial arts people. Shout out Nicole. She's the best. Nicole Long's the best. Me and her hate each other for years, and she's the best. Anyway, she's one of the few that regionally gets it. Okay. But so whenever you have these situations with like amateurs, first off, none of these fights are that tough. You might lose, you might win, but there's nobody out there right now. Okay, let me take that back. There's only a handful of guys out there that are amateurs that are so good. And it's not even necessarily good. They're dangerous that you have to be prepared and careful to take fights like that. You don't want to just take them on like 2 weeks notice because you don't want your kid to get killed.
Sure.
Right. But the rest of the time, these are fights that you shouldn't even be thinking about.
Yeah.
Right. Like, the kid's a D1 wrestler. Like, okay, are you trying to get better or are you trying not to lose?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're trying not to lose, the best thing to do is just not fight. You'll never lose. You can take all the internet pictures you want. You can be on Instagram, like with shirts off in the gym, Jack. Like nobody's gonna question you. You don't have to step in and compete at all. But if that's the whole point,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if the point is, I want to go and become a professional fighter, right?
Yeah.
You have to take these challenges. That's the whole, because you're gonna get them either way. You either make it to a point where you like. So the reason why I brought up boxing is that this is a thing that sort of came from the boxing. Sorry, it kind of came from the boxing like way of doing business, right? So in boxing, if you're a guy's, say he's like 3 or 4-0, even if it's 3 or 4 knockouts, nobody pays attention to him. That's how it's supposed to look, right? You got to get in that like 18, 19. Like Devin Haney, when we went out and sparred him, he was 19-0. Nobody heard of him yet.
That's so nuts,
right? Well, that's just how they do it.
Yeah, yeah.
So mixed martial arts eventually came to that conclusion too. Like, hey, a guy who's 10-0 sells way better than a guy who's 2-0, right? Well, it's hard to get to 10-0 if you're doing it the right way.
Super hard, yeah.
It's hard, right? You got to fight. It's one of those guys got to be good.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, look how many undefeated fighters are in the UFC right now. Right. Not many,
right?
Yeah.
So and I don't know if guys can't read records very well. I'm assuming they can because they say no a lot, which means they can read through the lines that way. But at the same time, you're only fighting these guys that are terrible, or you like what we would call like sure things. So it's like, you go into a fight. So like we fought the kid from Penn State.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it was a 50-50 fight.
Yeah. I wanted to bring that up because it's a perfect demonstration of what you're saying. JR was 2-0.
Right.
If he was a guy who was concerned about being undefeated, that was a terrible fight for him to take. The dude is super tough, and he was a debut. It's a lose-lose for him.
Nobody else was going to take it. They told me they've been trying to get him a fight for a year. Nobody would take anything.
Yeah.
It's an amateur fight. It's the whole point. And what did we lose? Did we lose some momentum? Some imaginary momentum that JR had? Like, he's winning fights. He's a tough kid. He's gonna beat the next kid. We're taking the things that we get in out of it, and we're gonna go back out and do it again. And we came back to the drawing board. This is what we need to work on.
Yeah.
These are things that we saw. Here's moments of success. Here's whatever. We're fixing, adding, blah, blah, blah. And we're gonna go out and do it again. We're not gonna go, well, we should go. Is there any 0-3s out there?
Yes. Right.
Can we get an 0-3?
Yeah.
What is that? I mean, it helps your ego.
That's about it, though.
Yeah. You feel better.
Yeah.
I
feel like your gym in particular kind of beats the ego out of you anyway. Like there's just not much of a place there at Southside.
Yeah. Well, that's true. It's true. But it's also because it's legitimate. It's a tough gym. It's hard. We keep it that way. We do the same thing in boxing. I don't like, my guys always laugh because I'll never ask like who we're fighting. They'll say, hey, you got a kid, whatever weight for like Zach. I'm like, okay. I don't ask like what's his record or anything. I don't even care. And because, Zach's good enough, I put him in with whoever. He's going to fight. He's going to win way more than he loses.
Yeah.
Right. And then in a way, like, I don't want anybody to lose, but it makes my job easier because now I know what we need to do. If you're just beating everybody, it's really hard for me to get through to you and be like, hey, you're going to need to start paying attention to X, Y, and Z because in like 3 years from now, this is going to matter. Right. And like I've had guys that I've had these conversations with, and then down the road, they're like, oh, I saw the thing. Right. But whenever, you take an amateur fight, say you have some like specific weakness that's exploited. Like maybe you're wrestling against the fence isn't as good as it should be, or like you're hesitating on the feet a lot. That's like one of the things for like wrestlers,
right?
You're either going too hard or not enough. It's like that kind of thing. We can take it, sort of isolate it, put it out there, right? But you could be doing all those things great in practice. That happens all the time. Like you're doing all these things. So like all the things that the I can't remember what the kid's name is. The kid that JR fought. We practiced and we were ready and drilled out for all of those things. Every single thing. And all the things that I said that I didn't think we should stay away from, he did and it worked. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I told him no throws. I'm like, dude, do not try to throw. Like he's gonna feel the weight the first time because JR has a tendency to set the throws up and then like kind of do them, and then go for them. Well, they're ready for it. A throw is like a surprise, right? You have to just kind of hit that move and like to go in the third round. I did tell him if he's going to do it late. So we had an agreement on that part, but he's in there fighting. He's not thinking about shit that me and him talked about.
Exactly,
clearly,
man.
right?
Exactly.
But like, that's my point is you have all these plans and you do all this stuff and then you get the results you get. It's not always like, it doesn't always just work out the way you want it to.
Sure.
That
was Noah Hermosillo for people listening that watched our last card. And he's in a very unique position now, being 1-0 with that footage of beating a guy like JR.
Right.
He's going to be impossible to match now. If we can't find,
we'll fight him again.
If we can't find,
I'd fight him. I mean this. We'd fight him 3 times a year. I don't care. If there's nobody else, if all we're gonna get are these guys that are like scared, and all of a sudden their phone doesn't work, and like, look, I get it, right? I've been in this game a real long time. I don't think anything like less of you as a person.
Yeah,
but you're just wasting time, dude. You're just wasting everybody's time.
Couldn't have said it any better.
Oh yeah, you're not. It doesn't make you like some big pussy. We're not like talking to you. Just if look, hey, maybe I bet off more than I could you. Don't wait 2 weeks out and then start panicking. And all the excuses are always the same. So like, I shouldn't put this piece out. That's gonna make you guys a lot more trouble. You're gonna hear a lot more interesting excuses, but most of the time, and you've already know this.
Yeah.
These guys, before they make an excuse, they don't talk to each other about it, right? So like they don't necessarily know what you did. They just know like the general term. So like they basically all tell the same story.
Of course.
Right. And it's like the way I could always tell when it was bullshit is that it was like airtight. So there's like nothing you could do, but there's also no way to prove it.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. What are you going to do?
There's
you just got to pack it
no
in.
Doctor note. Well, you can't use an excuse that I could be like, oh, I tore my knee. Now I have to walk around with a crutch for 6 months. That sucks.
Right. It's like, oh, we see you on Instagram next week. You're training, and then he looks fine.
Or you have to have like a doctor's excuse.
Sure.
So like it has to be something like mental health issues. Come on.
Yes.
That's unfortunate to people who actually have mental health problems.
It is, man.
My wife was upset that I made that. Like I made a video and I called it bullshit or whatever.
We saw, yeah,
and she was upset with me because she actually thought that he had mental health issues. And I said, look, see, it worked.
Yes.
Like it worked.
Exactly.
You bought it. You're like, oh, I don't feel bad anymore.
It's a double-edged sword for sure. Because like you said, that I'm not saying that's a fake thing, but it is exactly what you said in that. Why are we wasting everybody's time in the meantime?
Well, here's what it is. It's one of those emotional manipulations that nobody could prove that other people have used. So, you can use it and get out, right? You'd be like, oh, like Ryan Garcia just got done saying it. This is not some new thing. You just saw somebody else do it.
You're right. Yeah.
It's great for them, right? Like, you don't think that we're going to remember or notice, which I don't know how that's possible. And nobody can really say anything to you about it. Right. And you also can't prove it. It's like headaches, double vision, stuff like that, right? Yes. And I mean, I get it, but the least you should do is just admit it.
Dude, I couldn't agree more. We got a bunch of studs in the chat right now. Phil Amaris in here saying just
That's
stud. Bad combo. Henry, what's up, dude? We've been trying to get this guy a fight. He's from Michigan, I believe. He's been wanting to fight for us for a long time. We're trying to make it work. Bo Bassett in the chat. There we go. There's a kid that's going to be hard to match if he ever wants to come over to MMA. We'll find somebody. Leyshock will have somebody for you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, that's the whole point, right? Yeah. The whole point is to fight the best guys.
Totally.
If that's not why you're here, you shouldn't be here. You can watch. I watch. You don't see me fighting. You know what I mean? I'm a little old.
You did, to be fair.
You don't see me fighting in the ring. I'll fight you outside.
Catch him on the south side.
Yeah, I'll fight you outside, but I'm not gonna.
When, dude, do you still scrap in the streets once in a while?
Hell no.
Okay.
No,
I just had to check. Mean, you and Greg Rudolph are you have a reputation.
I wouldn't say that I do. I would say that my side of the contract's always signed. Yeah. but but I got a lot to lose, so it's not really worth it.
It doesn't make sense.
Look, here's the other thing. Most of these kids, I'm not even gonna say kids. Most people in general, they don't really want to fight.
Right? So true. So true.
And if I can tell you don't really want to fight, like you're not actually down, I'm not gonna.
We're not doing.
I'm 41.
Yes.
Right. It's I'm a little old to be dusting myself off afterwards and like paying hospital bills and shit. I've done that enough. So we have to have growth.
Got it out of your system.
No, it's never out of your system. But I'm smart enough to know it's not worth it.
There we go.
You know what I mean?
Dude, it's funny you say it's all about growth because your journey in general is very interesting to me. You know, we briefly touched on it, but I want to dig into Pinnacle a little bit and how you got involved with promoting. Obviously, that's super interesting to me and 247 and people watching the podcast, the promotional side of things. Because if people don't remember, like Pinnacle at the beginning and when you were running Pinnacle, the cards were just, when you look back at the names on these cards, it's like, how did these even happen? Like, anyone would be like a dream card nowadays. You know what I mean? Like the talent that came through there was just like, oh my God. So what was it like? Did you realize at the time that you had something special, or is it more of a hindsight kind of thing where it's like, wow, Paul Felder fought Kama Worthy? Like, oh my God. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's real easy to sit here and be like, we knew everybody was going to be whatever. I wouldn't say that, but okay. So if I have to think back to like how I've deleted a lot of this, right? Because I appreciate how it's viewed now, but like I didn't always love doing it.
Right. Yeah.
You know, there's so much that comes with promoting that like that that people don't
talk
see.
About it all the
Right,
time. Yeah.
Right. So there's all these things and it's behind and blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares about that part really, but it means that when I was done, I was happy to be done. And then when I'm done with the thing, I don't fuck with it anymore. I don't even think about it. So like when it came to like our first card, we had Cody Garbrandt on there, Kama Worthy and Paul Felder fought. We had Adam Milstead,
Jericho might have been
Mark
on,
Jericho, yeah, he was on there.
Wilkins was on it.
Mike
think.
Wilkins,
Dude, it's a crazy card.
Yeah, there was a bunch of guys on there. So okay, so what made it easy for me was I was a big fan of the regional scene. That's kind of how I got back into fighting after doing it. Okay, so like when I started fighting, there wasn't really a thing yet.
Right.
It was, but it wasn't like, we were still fighting in like airplane hangars and shit. And I get that sounds really cool. But to us, we just wanted to be like, we wanted to be a thing.
Yeah.
We didn't want like the underground shit didn't feel cool. Like I get that it sounds cool, but at the time we felt like weird. We're like, what are we doing with this? Like we're like some weird bar.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? We wanted to be like an arena.
Yep.
It's only cool now. It was cool to be able to do it, but it wasn't like it sounds more glamorous than it is.
Exactly.
I guess like another way of saying it.
It's cool now because it feels like a gimmick, like a breakaway from the norm. Right. But then when it is the norm, it's not as cool.
Right. Right. Well, we just wanted it to be a legitimate thing so bad that we wanted to skip like the barns, you know, but I fought in like the barn time, So anyway, once I got through that period of my life and I realized that like all these fights were falling out, it was like you would go, so like you guys are very connected, right? So like you text messaging wasn't even the thing yet. It's some early stages.
Sure, yeah.
So like you would call like a house phone, it would just ring like the promoter, and they would, so say you would train 6 weeks, like Wednesday, you're going to some random address in Columbus, Ohio, right? You just drive out there. You don't know where anybody is. There's no way to Google it or anything. You would MapQuest
print it. Yeah.
And you would find out like Friday night. We've driven to fights and they just weren't happening, right? Like the whole show is just like dead. There's nobody there. Or like stuff like that, okay? God. So, it's always been tough with like fights falling through and all this sort of stuff. So like after a while and devoting so much of my life to this like one thing, and it just didn't really pan out. And I get there's like some percentage of a cop out there. Like I also had a loss or two in there that like wasn't the, whatever. And it just didn't seem like it was going anywhere. And then I'd committed so much of my life to it that I started getting I wanted to like drink and go do stuff. You know what I mean? I've been like, I skipped a bunch of shit. Anyway, so I gave it a break. I traveled for a few years. I trained and all that sort of stuff. But then when I came back, all of a sudden it was like legitimate. Right. So it was my very first show back was Yankee Lake. Remember Chuck Haskell, who's now the
Ohio commissioner.
Ohio commissioner, which nobody saw that coming. Sorry, Chuck. I know we're pals, but
geez, the glow up.
Yeah, right. Holy shit. But anyway, it was Yankee Lake. Mark Jericho was on the card. It was his second amateur fight. And there was a ton of people there. And I couldn't believe that how first off, that there was a show with like, I think the last show I fought on had like maybe 100 people at it or something. this show was outside. They had like, you know, a couple hundred people, and it was like set up, and they had like a walkway. It was the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe anybody was like, you know, not paying attention to this. Right. It was
Sure.
it's the coolest thing I've seen ever. Right.
Yeah.
And blah, blah, blah. So I started writing this like website, and that got me really connected to like the regional scene. I would go to like different shows in Ohio and stuff. And there was a regional show that doesn't get, nobody talks about it anymore because most of the people, they're not gone like dead. They're just not in the game anymore. It's called NAFS, NAAFS,
Oh yeah, dude.
right? North American Allied Fight Series. And they were in Ohio.
Insane. Yeah.
And they had the reason why I'm telling you all this is because you're asking how I did the Pinnacle thing. So I can't be honest with you about Pinnacle if I'm not honest with you about NAFS. Right? Because NAFS is where I saw what worked.
Yep.
So what NAFS did was they made an amateur tournament. It was the best tournament in the country. And Stipe Miocic came through it.
Yep.
Right? Heavyweight champion of the world. If you don't know who he is, you should just shut all this shit off right now.
Yeah. Why are you watching this podcast?
This is way too locally specific
Right.
if you don't know who that guy is. Jessica Nick Duel. He never really panned out as a top tier professional, but he fought him like Bellator and stuff. I'm not good at names. Chris Curtis came through there. He's still active. There's a bunch of guys. I don't know.
There are, yeah.
Bill Algeo.
Yep.
He's still active in the UFC.
Did Matt Brown or Cody ever fight for them?
Cody Garbrandt did. He won it.
There you go.
So let me try to think of what else. There's a couple other interesting ones. They'll come to me. Anyway. I'm terrible at that part. But head trauma and recreational drug use.
The
my
double
term.
whammy right there, brother.
Yeah, right. So, but anyway, they had this amateur tournament that it started off with like a bracket, and then they would fight and fight. And then at the end, they did a show every year at like Christmas or whatever. And they'd have this big pro card. And they would have these amateur fights, amateur finals.
Mm-hmm.
And the tournament was so good, right, that the kids that came out were basically, it's like Isaiah Chapman fought through that. He's
R.I.P.
Yeah. Who else won? I don't know. Whatever. I don't want to waste time thinking about it. But they, they had this really great tournament system, and it made so much sense. And I watched them do it, and then I noticed they started heading towards like more of the professional side. I think it was because as a promoter, you get your little crop of people that bring tickets in and stuff, and you want to keep them busy. So you kind of pay more attention to those. Chris Lozano was in that group.
Yep.
Like Nick Duel, like I said. I'm trying to think who else was there. Bobby Brents was there from Michigan. He was one almost beat Stipe. Anyway, long story short, they were maintaining the ticket sellers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they were keeping them busy, and they started getting away from this amateur thing. And I always thought that was like a strategic mistake. So a couple years go by, and a good friend of mine, still a good friend of mine today, calls me up totally out of the blue and says, "Hey, what do you think about starting a promotion?" And I'm like, I haven't thought about it at all. And I'm like, but if we're going to do it, I know the right guy. So I call my buddy Dave Click, and he was running a show called Cage of Chaos in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
They were running, but so Dave was like southeastern, and NAFS was like northeastern, I guess, whatever, by like Cleveland. It was like based out of Cleveland. So they weren't close enough to each other to really be like squabbling at all. Well, on paper anyway.
Sure.
So,
Still squabble. We know how it goes.
A little bit, right? So I call him, and we sort of take this model, and we're like, okay, we're gonna. So I called it the Pittsburgh Challenge Series, where we put these like amateur things together. And to be honest with you, we never did it as good as they did. Just never. We did okay. I mean, we had some good tournament winners, and we had some guys. We had some pretty good guys holding the belts, like Cody Garbrandt held one, Don Mazzata held one, Mark Jericho held one. We had some legitimate people.
Pretty good guys.
It wasn't well, what I mean. But only one world champs was pretty good.
There we go.
If it was all three world champs,
okay.
It was very
fair.
Yeah,
fair.
Yeah. If nothing else, I'm at least honest.
It's true.
At least about this sort of shit.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's how we got this whole thing started. I don't know if this is like super interesting, and I'm assuming it's probably super.
I think it's super interesting.
Right. So, well, thanks. I appreciate it. As far as I know, I'm only talking to you.
We got some comments thinking it's interesting too. So keep going. You're in the right place.
Okay. I'm heading in the right direction. All right. So, so we started that out. The very first show, there was another group at the time. So like right now, you guys are running alone. I started out with competition day one, and they didn't like me. Surprise, surprise. And you know, I've noticed that most of the time when people don't like me, it's because they're threatened. You know, I have some of that now, right? And I, you know, it just is what it is, right? I'm not. I've been in conflict my whole life. I'm good with that. And these guys had their own operation, and they were just fucking terrible, right? And they had some weird like I remember the one logo, like, so when they found out we were doing this, they had this, like, there's always like this immediate reaction, right?
Of course.
There's like some response, and which is always funny because it's like you know, like I know why you're doing this. It's like they're not like fooling anybody,
right?
Right.
Right.
It's like whenever you say something to somebody and then they go on the internet and they like
They
indirectly
subtweet you.
insult you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that
right.
kind of shit. And they had like a logo, it was like hand drawn, you know, just like not really putting any. You know what the funny part was? I think they thought it was good. Like I think they actually thought this was like legit, but whatever. So I don't remember, like we had some like battles with them back and forth. They basically mostly them just like throwing rocks at me, and I just kind of like did my own thing, which by the way worked out pretty well.
I was gonna say
at that time,
Yeah.
anyway. And you know, that's like you learn the first rule about public competition is the moment you acknowledge them, you like bring them up to your level. So I just never mentioned them once. I just always did my own thing. And then like if I would make little jokes about them and stuff, like
Sure.
on the blog. You know, I had a
Sure.
weapon
I remember
because I had a blog,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, lots of people read it, which I was very surprised. So anyway, this all kind of culminated towards, I think their last fight was when Dom Mazzata and Cody Garbrandt, maybe not their last one, but like their last notable
hurrah. Yeah.
right. And that was a fight that we set up between Dom Mazzata and Cody Garbrandt. Now, most of the people who are listening to this podcast outside of like Phil Maris probably don't remember who Dom Mazzata is, but we had a 135-pound kid here who, as a professional, was as good as anybody you could find that wasn't signed to the UFC.
Yeah.
We couldn't find a kid that he wouldn't kill. He would fight any guy you would say. He didn't care who it was. He didn't care what the circumstances was. He didn't care what their record was, never even asked. Right? That's what it used to be like. Right? He was a fucking animal. He was
so
kicking
good,
kids
dude.
in the face,
So
knocking them
good.
unconscious, choking them unconscious. He won the NAFS tournament. He choked one, two. I'd have to go back and look, but he finished everybody, right? You know, and you when you watch him, you wouldn't even realize. We meet him, he's just like this little guy, kind of unassuming, and he was a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He had great kickboxing, which he got from Phil, and he was scrappy. You know, Isaac was his mentor,
Yeah.
right? And then on the other side of the stable, I had Cody Garbrandt. And, you know, obviously everybody knows who he is. So I don't have to give you the whole spiel, but at the time, it was like, you knew he was good, but we didn't really know how good, right? And it's like, you don't realize what you're watching, and you don't really get what you're watching until you see it like in hindsight, right?
Right.
So he obviously was he is a very skilled, you know, speedy kid. Well, when you see him regionally, you like when you watch him in like a 20-foot cage in like the isoplex, you really get the idea of like how much faster this kid is than everybody.
Insane.
You know, he just threw fucking rockets. And then we made that fight happen through like social pressure, which we talked about.
Yeah.
You know, and we got Dom on the hook to make the fight. And I knew that if I pushed his ego button, he would respond, which he did. He had made a mistake of calling us out at the end of one of his fights. He kicked this kid in the face, Jeremiah Yeager. You probably know the name.
For sure.
Yeah, he kicked him in the face at a walk-off KO. It was beautiful. I mean, gone. First round, kicked him, spun, walked, hands up, the whole nine, right? Perfect, like Peter Hart style.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they give him the mic, and the very first thing he says is like, fuck him, to me.
Nice.
Right. And I'm not there. I'm watching like on stream. And I'm like, you get all this time. And we didn't even have any problems as far as I knew.
Dang.
But he just like, you know, he had something, he had to get off, whatever. Right. So that, but because everybody saw that gave me the door to start pushing for this other one. Right.
Sure.
So, you know, we made that one happen, and it turned out, I mean, it was crazy. You know, it was a crazy fight. They had to get the SWAT team there.
Yeah, I mean the stories from that still to the probably forever it'll be the biggest fight in Pittsburgh history. Like I don't even know how you do that again in today's culture.
You can't do it if it's not organic.
Right, exactly.
That's just one of those ones. But again, you're talking about two guys who never skipped anybody.
Yeah.
They didn't, Cody
that's
Garbrandt
also what I mean.
Yeah, he wasn't skipping anybody.
Right.
He just when we were in, like, it didn't matter who he was going up in weight. There was a kid named Clint Musselman. He was from Cleveland. He was 145 pounds, big, like jacked white kid, beat everybody, real strong, just like he'd get on top of guys, just like gorilla fuck. They couldn't do anything.
Muscle Man, great name for him. There we go.
Right. And Garbrandt knocked him out in one round.
Cody and Dom both, man. Like you said, for anybody listening who's interested, like there's plenty of regional highlights of both these guys on YouTube. Please go watch them.
Yeah.
They were, like you said, it was just clear they were the two alphas.
Right. Oh yeah. And they came about the right way. They trained, they fought all the right guys. They weren't super selective. I mean, sometimes there's dumb fights, right? And sometimes, So anyway, I've talked about that part too much. But anyway, my whole point is like, how did I make these cards? They sort of made themselves. And honestly, I'd love to sit here and pretend like this was because of me, but it's really not. The way those cards were built were Dave Click and Joe Demore. They knew, and they had these relationships, and we sort of sat down and kind of like mixed and matched, and they were very good at getting them done. I was more of like the guy that paid for like the venue. Got it. Right.
Yep.
I wish that I could pretend like, I had this like great responsibility and all of these things, but I had my share, don't get me wrong, but like, it wasn't just me for sure. So those fights sort of worked out the way they did. And then, once so Dalton Rasta came through our system, right? It's like, that was the whole point for us. Our whole thing was, we're building a system that when these kids come in, like, hey, I don't have one fight. How do we get a guy with no fights to the UFC? That was like the question we asked ourselves, right? And that's what we did. And then it just happened to sell tickets. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
We didn't go, we're going to sell tickets and then just like make a fight and just try to make a fight. We're like, we need to develop. So like, the hard part is that the culture has gotten away from it so far that you're going to lose like 70% of the people, which is fine. That's pretty much what you're going to have to do if you're going to try to turn it around, because they'll run. Yeah, they'll run. They'll go other places. That's what they did it back then. The ones that didn't want to do it, they never fought for us. You can go back. I'm not going to name any names, but there's people who are relevant in the industry right now that had one fight, two fights, and then we never heard from them again. Right? Because they knew it was tough, right? So the best thing and worst thing that's ever happened to Pennsylvania was West Virginia. Okay. Because if you did West Virginia right, you can go down and you could build a kid up just like they do in California with Mexico.
Yep.
The old West Virginia Athletic Commission was like 3 dudes that did it like 3 hours a week.
It was crazy.
And they didn't care.
No.
They literally didn't care.
Total Wild West down there.
We saw guys that were like 175-1 as an amateur fight a dude that was like 0-10 because he was in the crowd and like had his gear, and that was no problem, right? But so these kids would go down there and hide and get these like walk through opponents. It's then you arise with, do you want to take a real fight because you really want to do this, or do you want to win because winning feels great,
right? And
winning looks great on the internet,
right?
And I get it.
Yeah.
And we all want to win. We all want to look nice on the internet. Most of us anyway. But if you're trying to be a professional, there's obviously one way to go.
Yes.
Right. One time. So, you know, Tom Yankello is, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Tom Yankello, in my opinion, is probably the most prolific boxing trainer. I don't know if prolific is the right word. He's the most established boxing trainer in the Pittsburgh area, as far as I would say. There's other guys that are close to him, but he's probably the one. Nobody else has a world champ, right? So that's where the conversation stops. How many world champs do you got?
Kind of like the Cody Garbrandt discussion.
Right. One guy raises their hand. That's it. So like, this kind of stops the conversation. one time I was up at his gym. This was like 15 years ago, and we were watching this kid train, and he was pretty good. And I said, "What's his record now?" And he said, 22-0. And I went, "Man, that's great. Like that's like what you want, right?" And he's like, "Well, not really." And I said, "Why is that?" Like, I thought that was the whole point.
Right.
Right. Like on the surface, that seems like to be the whole point. 22-0, like you're making the money.
That's it. Yeah.
Because the problem now is he has to fight to his record.
Mm,
So his skills aren't actually where they're supposed to be.
right.
And he's 22-0.
Yep.
So we can't get him any more scrubs because he's 22-0.
22-0. Yeah.
But he's only fought scrubs.
Oh man.
We fought 21 cab drivers in
It
one
makes
piece of
perfect
delivery,
sense.
dude. And now we got to go fight somebody who did it the right way.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get cleaned out on TV. He was
Dude.
right. That's actually literally exactly what happened the very next fight. And I'm sure this dude doesn't listen to this podcast, but I'll keep the name to myself. But he was from Johnstown.
Mm,
In case if anybody who's old enough to remember that.
piece it together from that.
Yeah.
But dude, it's a super interesting discussion because if you think about it, we've had maybe not the history that some places have in terms of guys going to the next level in MMA, but there's a bunch. You mentioned Garbrandt, Mazzata, Kama, Adam Milstead, Dempsey, Cherico. They all had hard fights on the way up, and they all, let me make sure before I say it, I feel like they all even lost regionally on the way up. For sure, most of them did that I just named. Like Cody,
yeah.
Cody has an AMI,
Yeah,
but
right.
but not as a pro. Obviously, he was undefeated as a pro. But
I don't think Dempsey lost as
I don't know if Dempsey did either.
And Cody Law didn't either.
Yeah, Cody Law for sure got in clean.
Yeah, but he also didn't fight professionally as a regional guy,
Right,
which was that was a decision
strategic.
we made.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I figured. But the point stands that like, look at if that's the goal, if that's any regional MMA coming up right now, fighter's goal, just look to the guys who have already done it. Like
right.
they weren't cherry picking everything. They took hard fight. We just talked about Kama fought Paul Felder.
And his
That didn't go
pro
his
debut.
way. Yeah, that
was
didn't
his
go.
professional debut.
That's so ridiculous.
Yeah, he's always fought like
so ridiculous.
crazy opponents.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And
Yeah,
some of the ones he shouldn't have, in my opinion. I love the dude,
yeah.
you know, but and there's a bunch of those guys. So here's the argument, right? People go, well, there was fights he should have taken. Sure, yeah, that's true. But like, you remember Brian Rogers?
Yeah.
He told me this one time, and it's something I already knew, but like hearing it from him made more sense. If you're not destroying guys on a regional level, and like let all these, you know, whoever listen to this in a couple months from now or whatever, if you're not trashing these guys, it doesn't really matter who they are on this like regional level, you're never going to make it in the national level.
Yep.
It's just not going to. So like if you think you're going to back into this like accidentally by beating like whoever, I don't even know who any of the guys' names are, but if you think that you're going to fight like a bunch of 0-3s and then maybe like a 1-4 and then maybe a blown up like 6-1 guy that like, you know, is not that great, that should be the end of it. Because you're going to go up and fight these kids that are coming from real like regional systems where they don't have a choice. Like Camo in California, these guys they're real. Las Vegas has a system too where it's a tournament. It's just like it's like Golden Gloves.
Yep.
They're fighting the best guys.
Exactly.
You know? It's just not gonna happen. And that's okay. But if the goal is to, you know, do anything more than Instagram, you're gonna have to do the right stuff.
Dude, I so couldn't agree more. And I always think about it like this is like, if you think you're good enough to be in the NBA, but you can't walk into the local YMCA and dunk on everybody,
right?
You're not good enough to be in the NBA.
That's very true.
Yeah, like that's how it is.
And it's tough for you to say that because you're the promoter now. So because you're the promoter, you're coming from this position of like, I'm trying to talk you into taking a fight that's bad for you, right? And they're not wrong, but it's not that it's not bad for you. It's that if this fight is bad for you, this sport beyond this point is probably not for you,
right?
And everybody jumps off some point. Like I wouldn't say everybody, most people.
Sure. It is a very select few that are in it for
Cody Law.
Yeah.
He's still in it and he's very successful and he's done really well. And he, again, did all the right stuff. He fought a kid from, I think he was from Stout. This is like back in the 2017-ish time period.
Man.
He was a D1 wrestler from Mizzou. He fought him. We had a show at the VFW, which everybody fucking complained about. I loved it, but everybody else was bitching. And it was a war. The kid was so tough. You know, those are the ones that he didn't avoid anybody.
Dane Espinosa.
Yeah,
probably.
Sure. I don't know. I didn't remember the kid from like 3 weeks ago.
That was at Pinnacle 18. So
yeah, I'm definitely not remembering Dane.
That's a great point. You didn't remember Noah Hermosillo either. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no way. Sorry, Dane. I'm sure Dane doesn't give a fuck.
You said good things about him, at least leading
He was
up
a
to
real-
forgetting his name.
Yeah, he was a very tough. Oh, well, same with no. I respect all these guys. None of the things that I'm saying are coming from a position of not respecting what people are doing.
Absolutely, dude.
It's just more of like from a position of, hey, I get you think you're like getting over and like maybe we don't know. Like I always know. I tell my
Mhm.
guys this all the time. I've been in this longer than you've been alive, most of you. You're not
Very
going to tell me
accurate.
some weird excuse I'm not going to know.
Yep,
So like it's way
yep.
easier to just be honest. I'll have way more respect. Right.
Awesome. That's
And,
great.
you
Great
know,
advice. Great
right.
perspective. Yeah.
Right. What's the point of lying? It only makes it worse. We all know you're lying anyway. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Mental health issues.
Now,
Okay. dude.
now
Right.
you're
Right.
We got a comment. I don't remember this fight. I want to see if you do. Somebody commented and said Darnell Pettis versus Davy Crocker was my favorite regional fight ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't remember that
Yeah.
one.
Davy Crockett. His name was actually
it was Davy Crockett?
Yeah. That's
Okay,
his
so
like
autocorrect
legit
got it,
legal
my
name.
bad.
Davy Crockett.
That's
Like
sick.
the
Sick.
fucking
Yeah.
hat guy.
Daniel Boone ass guy.
Daniel Boone, yeah.
Yeah.
Coonskin hat. I don't even know what you say anymore.
That's sick.
Davy Crockett. Yeah. So Darnell Pettis was a kid from Cleveland. Cody Garbrandt knocked him out too.
Mm.
But anyway,
Unreal run.
he had like a good boxing background. And Davy Crockett was like your typical Southwest Pennsylvania, like tough, gritty white kid that wrestled. But where was he out of? I think he was out of Ground Zero, those
Okay.
guys. But
Yeah,
they weren't
yeah.
called Ground Zero back
Gotcha.
then. If I'm wrong about that, sorry guys.
We'll
But
fix it.
I'm pretty sure. But anyway, he was a
Good
tough
job.
kid. No, that had to, I don't know, whatever. But anyway, I don't even know why I tried it.
The fact that his name's Davy Crockett is sick, first of all.
yeah,
Like that's
and
just
that,
awesome.
You remember Spike TV?
Yeah.
That was
absolutely.
their top 15 knockouts.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we got like a little plaque.
That is sick. Pretty Richie in here. He said there's still a picture of that fight in Matt's gym.
That's true.
Nice. I gotta see that. That's beautiful. Yeah, round 3 KO. So what happened? What was the knockout? How'd it go down? Do you
I don't
remember? Damn. Okay.
I
I
mean,
gotta find it.
Darnell Pettis pieced him up pretty much the whole fight and then caught him with something big at the end. And it was like, you know, it was a Chip Snyder kind of letting it go a little bit.
Roger
and,
that.
And hey,
How do you feel about that? I feel like Chip, you know,
I love the guy.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm
I
glad
do.
we're on the
And-
same page.
Chip is a very smart guy. I think that it's a very tough job.
Yes, I could not agree more. And I think he does a really good job of amateur to pro. He changes the way he refs also.
Yeah.
Like he'll let a pro take more damage, knowing like this guy's more skilled. He might figure it out.
Right.
But in Ami, like I know a lot of like fighters sometimes think he stops fights too soon for Amis, but not really, man. Like, what are we doing here? You don't need to die.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's where we disagree on Chip.
No, I don't think he stops him too early. I think that that's the thing you say, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But like, you're happy that he stopped it.
Oh,
I mean, I'm in the corner with you.
Yeah.
I'm the one taking your mouthpiece out.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever had anybody got beat really bad that was like upset about it.
Right.
I think
You
that's
kind of
just
know
the stuff you
kinda
say.
know. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that makes perfect
You're
sense.
like, oh man, I was just, you know, like in the old days, he'd be like, oh, I was just getting ready to have my way or whatever. It's like
yeah,
that kind
had
of
him
thing.
right where I wanted him.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. It's like, yeah. Okay.
You definitely didn't. You were on your back taking elbows.
Chip is right. Chip is a smart guy. He's an interesting dude, and he knows a lot about fighting. He runs his
So
gym.
seasoned. Yeah.
He's been around forever.
Oh, dude.
You know, and he's consistently good. I mean, I know people complain, and some people be like, ooh, whatever, but like you can't please everybody. But at the end of the day, if you really think he's doing a bad job, go get
do
your
it.
fucking thing and start reffing.
People
Like,
don't know how hard it is, man.
They
They
don't.
really don't.
It's easy to just say stuff online.
Facts.
You know.
Even just the speed. You mentioned Cody Garbrandt's speed earlier, which is funny because he really was just and is, like you said, still on such a different level speed wise. But I think the general speed of fighting, if you've only ever watched it on TV, in person, there's so much. It's all so much faster.
It's way faster.
It doesn't even make sense sometimes.
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons why you'll see two guys that, you know, they're obviously like I'm trying to think of a good example of it. It happens a lot more in boxing where you'll think there'll be like an obvious speed disadvantage, but there actually ends up not being one. Sometimes timing negates that for all you like technical guys that want to start complaining. But
It's a good rabbit hole, yeah.
Right. We'll stay away from that. Obviously, I'm not great with tangential conversations, so I'll try to stay on the path here. But you know, you can watch a guy on TV and you don't really get how much faster the reaction times and stuff are until you see him in person. I'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
And Cody Garbrandt was, I've talked about it a lot today, so whatever. But anyway, he just, that was his weapon. It wasn't the power. I mean, he hits hard, but everybody hits hard. Once you get to a certain point, they all hit hard.
Yeah.
There's no, if you're a professional fighter and you do it the right way, you can punch somebody hard in the face.
Sure.
It's the fact that he could make these like last second decisions and then pick the right option and then leverage into it hard enough that you're like unconscious. It's pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
Especially like, I don't know, early on. Like you get the confidence eventually and you like know you're going to do it, but there's that time period before you where you think you're going to do it, and when it actually starts happening, like that's where you find out, where you're really at. And he was very good with that. He's a very fast guy.
He seemed to figure that out early for sure. He had the swag. He had the swag before he ever stepped in the cage.
So there was a fight one time in Naps. He fought Tyler Saltzman. Tyler Saltzman was a Penn State wrestler. He
was a really good fighter too.
Yes, he was. He was a very skilled guy, but he just was not on Cody Garbrandt's level. And they talked a bunch of shit. Tyler Saltzman, what Tyler Saltzman would do was go on Facebook and have these like very like elementary insults, but they were like funny and he wouldn't stop. Like, so like,
I love it.
And like, people start getting really upset and then like, they'll like pick on each other. Like, who was the guy who just apologized? Like, oh shit.
Oh man,
the rap guy.
I wish I could help.
J. Cole.
J.
Cole like writes a thing and then apologizes. That never happened. In the
that.
old days, nobody Tyler Saltzman was never apologized. He does not care.
Keep calling you a nerd.
Yeah, he doesn't care to do whatever. So he would insult Cody Garbrandt. Cody would get really upset and get mad, would say his own shit back. But
of course,
it just Tyler Saltzman was just a little bit better at it.
That's
it doesn't matter because Cody won the fight, so who gives a shit? But
exactly,
and Cody tuned him up for 3 rounds, didn't stop him like intentionally. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he couldn't. I don't know, but I feel like he could have. He tuned him up for 3 rounds, and that's when you really got, because the whole place was packed. I'm trying to think of who Stipe fought. He was like the main event. It was Jessica I was on that card.
Oh my god!
I could probably do Tyler Saltzman, Cody Garbrandt. Look at the event, base of the card.
Yeah.
But anyway, the whole place was there for them because they had talked so much shit online, and then of course I was instigating it through like, whatever, because it was interesting. He went out there and handled that pressure like it was nothing.
That's awesome.
Like that's when you start getting the like,
yes.
You don't find out how good guys are because they fought nobody. You see what you put them in a bad spot, see what they do. Because fighting is all about bad spots. It's not about winning. Everybody can throw a punch and land and be done.
Yeah.
That happens all the time.
True. Yep.
Like
super true.
There'll be a guy at your work that just happens to get off a little ahead of somebody else, knocks him out. Next thing you know, he's like the toughest dude at work. Yeah. Right. If he would have fought 3 times, he would have lost 2.5 of those times. Right. It just
saw the one instance where it happened. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's what happens when you're in a really bad spot. What do you do? Well, everybody's here. You've talked all this shit. Now it's time to back it up. Mark Cherico was very good at that. Him and Francis Healy had a whole thing. This is like years ago.
Cherico's shit talking was so fun.
Yes. He also didn't care.
Correct.
He was, he also didn't care at all. Well, but he also knew that he was going to win. He was sure of it. So
awesome.
It was like a foregone conclusion, basically. The only guy he lost to was
Kelleher, man.
Yeah, but Kelleher.
Insane. That was an insane fight. If anybody listening, Brian Kelleher, you probably know him from being in the UFC, and Cody Garbrandt actually knocked him out, I believe. So there you go.
Yeah, just like last fight, right?
Yep.
I didn't see it. Oh no, he fought Davison Figueiredo.
Oh yeah,
before him.
Figueiredo. Right. Congreb Boxing Club in the chat with a little boxing glove. There we go. Nice.
Mike McSorley
and Pretty Richie. Saltzman was the original shit talker. That dude was a legend at selling fights. Yeah,
he was.
Saltzman was good, dude. And Drew Flincham, shout out, dude. He said, "I'm listening to you boys during my weight cut in the sauna."
Oh, nice.
Good luck, bro. Good luck.
Don't pass out.
Don't pass out. Please don't pass out in the sauna. Don't pull. Who did that? Henan Burrell?
A bunch of people.
Yeah, I mean,
you're not really cutting weight if you're almost dying.
You got to die a little bit. How do you feel about that personally? Weight cutting in MMA specifically?
I think that. I feel like. How do I feel about it or what I think about it?
Like, do you think guys should do it? Okay.
Not really. I mean, if I'm like logically thinking it out, no, I don't think it's a great idea. I feel like it's part of the sport at this point. I don't know how you'd stop it. Like, I know one was trying to do it, but like basically you were just you're going in being honest, and then you're fighting a guy 15 pounds up.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How'd that one work out?
I see all the time one's hydration tests. Like I'll see guys fail them and then they're still fighting. And it's like, so is this a real thing? Is this a real regulation, or are we just trying to act like we're trying to do something? I
just think there's some, I think here's my opinion is, if you really are worried about weight cuts, like if the athletic commission, all these people, then they need to do 24-hour weigh-ins on everybody.
Yeah.
Because you have, and they should bring back IVs. Because if you're worried about dehydration, you're not worried about them like not drinking water. You're worried about the water in the brain, the fluid in the brain.
That's the way to get it.
So you would want that to be replenished as quickly and safely as possible.
Yep.
Right.
Facts.
So if that's really your concern,
allow it.
Yeah, that would be allowed. And look, if
Totally
you go, well,
agree.
we don't know what they're doing. Well, like, okay, you have enough control. You're sitting in weigh-ins. You're doing all this other shit. You mean you can't have a nurse come there and just put a bag on them?
I don't get that either, to be honest.
I mean, it's one of those things that I get it.
There's a billion things like that. We could get off on tangents, but James Lito had a comment that made me literally LOL. He said, Matt's lying about weight cutting. He told me to go to 155. James at 155. Let's do it.
I think I did say that's how I felt. James. It's not what I thought.
Imagine James at 155.
Yeah, well,
that's what I want to see.
He could probably.
I think you can do it, James. I believe in you.
He could get there.
Dude, how this new crop, we're coming up on an hour, so I don't want to keep you too long, but sure. I do want to talk about the new crop of fighters you got at Southside, because you guys are slowly building an MMA stable, which is very exciting for us. You know, JR just fought for us. Obviously, James was supposed to fight on that card, but I'm hoping in the future this is a more regular thing, having Southside on our cards, and it looks like it's trending that way.
Yeah, I'm working on it. You know, I've toyed with this idea a bunch. I mean, we have a cage. I've, done this particular thing for a long time. I know a lot about it. I don't have the personal time to build it the way I could facilitate it, but I can't personally do it. Like we did the boxing thing, because I did this like before I had kids, and I sort of like developed this thing, and it worked out then. And then now I'm just sort of like me. It's like a wheel that's already spinning, and I go over and just spin it like a couple times a week.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I don't have to do anything.
Just keep it moving. Yeah.
It's very hard to get a new thing started. So I'm working on it. Do I think I'm going to have this like big squad? Probably not. I mean, I will honestly probably, but is it going to happen like right away? No, I don't. I also don't really love taking guys from other gyms, especially because like, they already have like weird sparring problems, right? So like, we're already talking about tough fights. Here's the other thing I see all the time. The guys that come in don't really want to spar, right? And I get it. It's hard. I don't really want to spar, but I'm also not fighting.
Correct.
Right. I'm not actively trying to do this thing. So it's fun when you learn about like 50% sparring. You're like, sweet, I'm going to do this forever. The problem is though, when you go from 50% sparring to 100% fighting, you're just not ready. And that's why when you watch like a lot of guys on your show, some of the ones in Ohio, not quite as much, they're just not very threatening. They're not really, nobody's really getting killed. But you're like, wow, this guy's really good, because they're not used to it yet. You need to be out there and you need to get your sword out and fucking swing it. And then you take a step back. Okay, cool. Hey, we did this. We're going to work on this day. You do your 50% sparring. Cool. How'd that work? Are we geared up? All right, get your sword out and you swing it. You fight to the death a couple times. Oh, bring it back.
Yep.
One of the best and worst things that like Max Holloway and Donald Cerrone and all these dudes that don't spar did is they left out that they already know how to fight.
Correct.
We are not getting kids from the streets anymore. We're getting kids from the computer chair. They have zero coordination. Not everybody. Some of these guys are wrestlers and all that stuff.
Sure.
But like the majority of the kids we're getting have no background in fighting at all. I ask every single one of them every time, have you ever been in a street fight before? I hear no or one 99% of the time now.
Crazy.
So there's no background in it, right? So you have to develop a tolerance for fighting, a conditioning for it. You can't go, well, I've never actually fought anybody, but I'm going to do it half speed. And then when I do happen, I'm going to
turn it on.
It's all going to work out. Right.
Yeah.
Like we don't do that with anything else.
Right.
Like you don't drive your car around at like 25 miles an hour and then like, okay, here's your license. You can take it up to 80.
Dude, that's a you're like the analogy king, dude. You've had some good ones on this.
Just you wait.
You've had some good ones on this podcast.
Just you wait, Hunter.
I was just talking to Brian Marska the other day, Matt Factory, black belt legend. What's up, dude? He was saying something funny because he knew I played guitar, and we were talking about that same concept of guys who never fought, but they think for some reason that if I get in a fight with Max Holloway, like I got a chance, I might be able to do it. He's like, why does nobody think like you can pick up a guitar and be better than John Mayer or Jimi Hendrix? Like nobody thinks that. No reasonable human's like, yeah, I can play guitar.
I really wish you wouldn't have lived with John Mayer. Like I really
that's what he said, so that was in my mind.
Well,
yeah.
But you could have said like Kerry King or
I should go Dimebag Darrell. Yeah.
Right.
Like if I was big, but he said Mayer, so that was the one.
I'm just kidding.
But
that's a little jab at John Mayer. I've always.
I don't love John Mayer either, but shout out, the dude can play guitar.
Apparently, he's pretty good.
Play guitar.
Yeah, I don't know.
He really can.
That's
he
not
really
my
can.
bag. I'm in the fighting business. I'm not in the gay music business.
For sure, Slayer and Pantera though. We can stick to that. But it's a great point. Like, why is fighting the one thing that you think you can just do without training or being like what?
It's the same problem that if you look at it, kind of happens across the board, right? So the original problem that we had in this particular area, like 25 Christian Gracie time period, you know what that is?
No, I don't know Christian Gracie. No,
man. Shout out Frodo. But
was that Jimmy Sarah? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. This is worth running over. I don't care. I don't know.
Let's do it.
I can be 10 minutes late, so we go.
Okay.
So there was a dude he had a mixed martial arts club on Brookline Boulevard, right next to my house. Where it's not new anymore, but the karate school is. And this kid's name was Christian Gracie, right? And he probably thought that everybody who knew about him is gone. Surprise. I'm still here, right? So, and I don't have any personal problem with him, but just a funny story. But anyway, he was a black belt, right? In like 2006. The only problem is that not really any other black belts anywhere, right? And he's also like undefeated cage fighter, but he had like Bill Hutchinson, Shane Shinaki, Brian Pfeiffer.
There you go.
There's a bunch of other dudes that trained with him because they didn't know.
Sick.
So at that particular time, there was an issue with like appraising your trainer because nobody knew enough. You just didn't know, right? Like he knew what a triangle choke was. You didn't know what an angle choke was. So he knows more than you.
Sounds good.
Right.
And also the internet wasn't the same.
Just wasn't the same.
So how are you even going to look it up? Yeah.
And there really wasn't any like, I mean, there was instructionals, but like if you did like a service level search, you never know what to look for. So
you had to be deep in the weeds.
Yeah, you couldn't like really appraise anybody's skill.
Exactly. Yep.
Right. And then eventually, after all his like black belts and tournament wins and stuff like that, he was on the Tap Out show. He fought Sunshine something. I don't know. There's a Pittsburgh one. If you go and watch it,
that's
the
awesome.
Tap Out guys, they came to like Braddock. I don't remember what it was. And somebody else remember that. This is not clearly my job is not to remember like obscure fighting television shows and people's names. But anyway, so like that was the initial problem, right? It's like you couldn't figure out what information were you getting, was it good or not, right? And that's still a problem. Don't get me wrong. But you can sort of fake that with like the internet now. You can go on Instagram and follow like 3 or 4 guys and kind of really study what they say and then pass it off as yours.
Yep.
Right. And okay, that's still better than what like Gracie did.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's another version of that with sparring. And what happens is I talk to these guys, especially once they start to win, your ego protects you. Right. It's like your projection of yourself. It's who you want to be. It's who you think you are. Right. So say you're like 3 or 4-0, you go into these situations and you don't want to lose to some just regular 15-year-old kid at some random boxing gym. Right. Like I'll lose to like somebody that's on paper better than me, but I don't want to lose anybody else.
Absolutely.
So you start to avoid these things. Right. Well, what happens is, if you might not even be aware of it, but you start to stick to guys that are like easier to work with. So the skill level of your sparring and competition also matter.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So like big fish, little pond. So I'll circle all this back to Garbrandt one more time. One thing he did that really surprised me was he went to alpha male. because he went from being the hardest out in sparring, because like everything he did in the fight, he's way better in sparring, as
Right.
everybody else in the world is, right? He does all the amazing shit in sparring, and like you get like 20% of it in the fights.
Yep.
So imagine having to spar that kid like in his prime before he even made it anywhere.
When he had
Right.
something to prove.
And he was hungry, and all he did was
exactly.
train, because he lived, you know, we had him hooked up. He
Yep.
didn't have a job or anything,
Yep.
you know? So he went out to Alpha Male and jumped into this really deep tank of guys. And that's why he, you know, he
Got
did
the
as
heights
well
he
as
did.
Yeah, because he pushed himself. He didn't just go, hey, I'm beating up, you know, Jim Bob and, you know,
Yeah, right.
whatever.
For the
all day.
400th time this month. Yeah.
Right. And that's one thing that I noticed that these dudes do. And it's comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Like I just started beating Jim. I don't want to move up.
Yeah, right.
I could beat
right.
Jim for another 3 or 4 months. And then what happens is you create these like blocks in your brain where you don't want to push on to the next guy, because you don't want
It's
to get back up.
interesting. Yeah. The psychology there is neat.
It's and everybody deals with it.
Of course.
Everybody. And most people avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you know, I'm sure there's a few guys that are listening to this right now who are like pretending it's not them, but it is. It's you. Because you know why? You know why I know? Because it was me.
There you go.
It was
That's
me
as
too.
real as it gets right
Yep,
there,
it was
ladies
me
and
too.
gentlemen.
I can see it on you because I had dealt with the same thing.
Nice.
And I just didn't have anybody point it out because they didn't know.
Nice.
Right. So like a guy like Colin Worthy does not have that problem. Colin Worthy is because he knows what he needs to do to win these things.
Mm-hmm.
He's been doing it long enough. He's fought enough guys. He's the luster has worn off. This is not a big surprise to him. He knows that he needs to fight and spar and work with the best guys he can get.
Yep.
So that's what he does. That's why he travels. He's at my gym with Cody Law, and he's comes in boxes, and he's getting punched in the face by like 15-year-old kids, you know, and they're good, right?
Yeah.
That's what because he knows this is what you have to do to be successful. He didn't go, hey, I'm going to make my own gym, and I'm going to be very careful about who I let in, and I'm only going to spar with the guys that I know I'm going to beat every time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to go out and try to fight people.
And look what he's done with his career. There's a reason. Yeah.
It's always the same problem.
Yeah, dude. I'm going to leave you with this because I know you got to get going, but I like asking guys who have been around for a long time. I always feel like this is a fun question, but what would be your Mount Rushmore of Pittsburgh MMA? 4 guys. It could be coaches, fighters, trainer. It could just be people affiliated with it.
I was not prepared
I know
for that question.
I know. That's why it's fun.
Well, I feel like it's like current, past, and present, right?
Yeah. Any generation.
I feel like you probably, I mean, you have to put Cody Garbrandt there, obviously, because he's one of the guys that went the furthest. I think you have to put Chris Custer there, or Eric Hibbler. Probably Eric Hibbler. I feel like you have to put him there, even though he's not like the fan favorite pick. But if we're being like objective, because he sort of like got this
Who
whole
made
thing,
it happen,
and he
that
like
matters.
spiraled downhill, because I was like 3rd generation away from him. So was that 2?
It's 2.
I don't know about the other 2. I'd have to think about it.
So tough.
Well, the thing is that I could name like 20.
Exactly.
Just because I don't want to. I'm a people pleaser. I don't want to piss anybody off any more than I already did.
I understand. But no, I like where the head's at, because it's like
I guess you have to put Garbrandt. You have to put him in there.
I mean, the height of becoming the UFC champion. Yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I don't know who the last one would be. That's like the tricky part.
The question would be: is Cody really Pittsburgh? Is he more of an Ohio guy, even though he was primarily training here for a while?
Okay, you can take him off. That's fine. You sold me. You sold me. I think I don't know. I'd have to think about it, because I don't know enough about the new kids now, and I haven't really seen anybody that.
Well, that's also the thing about a Mount Rushmore, is like it's probably nobody current,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, look at our actual Mount Rushmore. It's like, who founded them?
Who should I be paying attention to
right now?
Yeah,
I mean, obviously you know about Justin Patton. He's on a great run now.
Yeah, Patton's a great kid.
Ethan has 2 of our pro belts. He's right on the cusp of Goss.
Okay, yeah, I know Goss. Goss fought for us too. Yeah,
right on the cusp of doing something bigger than us, which is awesome. As
Great.
far as like a newly turned pro, Lucas Siebert's a guy that he's undefeated as an AMI, won our AMI belt, just got a flying knee knockout in his pro debut. He was a D1 wrestler, WVU.
Oh, what weight is he at?
135.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so he's definitely a guy that everybody's got their eyes on as like maybe the next thing.
How
Dude,
many amateur fights do you have?
5 or 6. I forget.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
not bad.
one or
Do you
the other.
find anybody good as an amateur?
He beat Cam Allgaier for our belt. So
Oh, good. Was that guy? Is he's good? I don't know.
he was Cam was the champ for a while.
Oh, so he's
like,
pretty good. Oh,
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Cam
all
was
about who
real
you
good.
take the belt from. Otherwise, the belt
Exactly.
doesn't mean anything. right?
Yeah,
If I
totally.
just go buy it at Walmart,
Totally.
I got
Yeah.
it from Walmart. That doesn't mean shit,
Exactly.
right? Like Mazzata got his from Garbrandt.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's how. So I'll keep it
So-
objective. I'm not just going to name our guys. Ferdaz, Bobby Murda, like he has a
Oh,
fight
yeah,
coming up
sure.
for Unified up in Canada,
Yeah.
but that's another guy that I look at as like he's got a real
he's
shot.
legit.
Yeah, for sure. But they're coming.
So,
They're
so
coming.
you mentioned Justin Patton. That's a guy who he's in the gym all the time. He's sparring who they put in front of him. He's fighting who they put in front of him.
Mhm.
Right? You know, it's a reoccurring theme. The guys that are really doing it are really doing it. The rest they're on the sidelines. They're get in the fucking game, dude.
Do it.
Get in the game.
Do you want to do it or not? You said it best. Like, are you in it to be a great fighter and to have a career fighting, or are you in it for Instagram likes?
Right.
Just be honest with you. Neither answer's bad.
Yeah, it's
I
fine.
get it either way.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've had lots of guys tell me like, hey, I'm just doing this because I want to do like X, Y, and Z with it. It's a hard way to get it done.
That's a wild way to do
It's
it.
a hard
but
way to get it done.
Let's
But
get it.
I respect that you're like, I'm gonna earn my Instagram likes by punching people in the face
It's inside a locked cage.
in a way that makes more sense than
Yeah.
like some of the other things. Like I'm not gonna like light myself on fire over like Palestine or anything. I'll fight a guy. Like I'll totally fight.
Given the choice, yeah, for sure. Let's
well,
fight.
you want to be famous.
Yeah. No, dude, that's a great point. But
Good
dude,
contemporary joke. Good.
for sure, that's a good one. We could for sure, dude. We could go for 3 hours. I'm gonna let you go. We're gonna do a part 2 though at some point with Matt Leyshock because, dude, we really did only scratch the surface of what you've done for the scene and what you're continuing to do for the scene and just the things you've experienced, man. For anybody who wasn't familiar with Matt Leyshock, now you are a little bit. And like I'm saying, the well goes a lot deeper. So I appreciate it, brother. It's been a long time coming getting on here.
Sure. Thanks for giving me the time.
For sure, man.
Appreciate it.
Just run it back soon. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Leyshock. Let's go.